We have a few special guests with us. We have Tim Holtkamp from McLennan Community College. Tim, could I ask you to introduce yourself to us just briefly?
Sure, I'm Tim Holdcamp. I'm with the Small Business Development Center here at MCC. We're part of a nationwide network. Every inch of the continental United States is covered by an SBDC service center. Our particular one here is hosted by MCC, and we cover 7 counties that range from Johnson, Hill, Bosque, McLennan, Falls, Bell, Coryell, Hill, unless I'm missing one in there. It's not my responsibility. I'm personally in charge of Bosque, Falls, and McLennan. And we have a full-time staff person in Bell that's in charge of Bell and Coryell. We were in the process of hiring a staff person up in Johnson full-time, but we have a part-time person that's in charge of Johnson and Hill counties.
Good, thank you. And you're here to talk to us about the PPP part of the CARES Act that might apply to churches, correct?
Well, no, I was going to talk to you just about in general programs that are available for small businesses.
Okay.
And then to give you kind of an idea of what's happening with the various acts right now.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Tammy Richards from Extraco Banks. I think you're Vice President of Extraco Banks. Tammy, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Tammy Richards. I'm an Executive Vice President at Extraco Banks in Waco. And I also have one of my colleagues in the office with me, Gail Barte, who is on the front lines also. She's a Senior Vice President with Extraco. We're both commercial lenders, so we are in the midst of this thing called the PPP. That is what is taking up, 150% of our time right now.
I am sure, and this was handed to you unexpectedly, I'm sure, and you're scrambling to understand and catch up with it just as we are.
We are.
Well, thank you for being here. I realize that even between you 3 guests this morning, there may be some things that aren't clear yet, and that's okay. We just appreciate you joining us and sharing what you do know with us on this call. We also have Vernon King on us. He's a friend of ours from years back, CPA here in Waco and a member of First Baptist Woodway and active supporter and encourager for churches. And Vernon, thank you for being here. Would you introduce yourself?
You've already done it. I'm Vernon King. I'm an accountant here in Waco.
Vernon has graciously forwarded to me some documents, an updated application for the PPP borrower, small business guide, and then I also have what I'll share a bit later is the Small Business Administration Faith-Based FAQ final from the General Counsel of the Baptist General Convention of Texas. Those documents will be going out in the summary email shortly after our call today. But y'all can be sure and take notes and help us through this. We're all trying to understand how this might be able to help our churches, and so we appreciate these folks being a part of this call today. Tim, can I start with you? Let's just let you talk to us a little bit about what do pastors need to know?
Okay, well, this whenever I got asked to be put on this call, I was a little hesitant because I don't have just a ton of good news for you guys individually as churches. But then I guess as I was thinking about it, I guess I got a little more optimistic because I guess somewhere maybe God laid on my heart a better plan for you guys that might be of benefit to you. And so let me just lay out what's happened and how we got here and those sort of things, if you don't mind, right quick. But
please.
Okay, so first of all, we have there's 2 programs that are currently available. All right, we have what's called the PPP, which is what you guys have all heard about. But before that, we had what was called the SBA disaster loan. Now that loan has been available. It's always available. Okay, we've had it one other time in McLennan County when the explosion took place in West. Okay, and there's always a disaster going on somewhere. It's typically hurricanes, earthquakes, that sort of thing. Okay, so it's a very well established program. Now, obviously, the whole country is a disaster right now. So everywhere in the country, any small business will basically qualify now. So every geographic area and every small business qualifies. So, and now with the CARES Act, they've added an additional piece to that that makes it, you know, pretty powerful, at least the way that they are selling it to us. Now, keep in mind, this is all brand new. This is huge. There's a lot of information that's coming down, and it's not getting a ton of clarification. Okay, but here's the way it's being sold, and this was as of a week ago today. Now, the loan itself is simple, and it's established, and I think it's solid. And the way that's going to be for a small business is that basically you're gonna fill out the application, which is a very simple online application. Now, we went through 3 iterations, but they have a established one now that's pretty simple. They're going to ask for two pieces of information. They're going to be total gross sales and their cost of goods sold, and then they're going to determine a loan amount, okay, which is going to be estimated at about 6 months of their working capital. Okay, and then that loan's going to be at 3.75%, and right now they're amortizing everybody for 30 years, and that loan doesn't have to be paid back, doesn't have to start payments for a year from the time you take the loan. And then you have 6 months from the time you're approved to decide to take the loan down. So you've got, basically, you can take it all down at once, or you can take it at the end, or you can take so much a month as you might need it. The other thing is you can apply for, after you've exhausted those funds, the possibility to apply for another loan in that program exists, okay? So it's a very powerful program. Now, last Monday, they added a $10,000 kicker, and here's the way that's being sold. If you make application and they turn you down for the loan, you get $10,000 forgivable. If you make application and you don't take the loan, you get $10,000 forgivable. If you make application and they approve you for the loan, you get $10,000 forgivable. So that's, basically, it's extremely unusual, but it's a pretty powerful loan program. And so that, at least that's the way they're selling. Now, nobody has gotten that yet. They're running about 2 to 3 weeks behind in getting that initial $10,000 out, because that's their goal, is to get $10,000 out quickly, then assess everyone's viability for the additional funds. Okay.
Are you able to put a link for that loan into the chat there to the right, Tim?
Yeah, I will. When I get done talking, I will put
That'd
it.
be great. Thank you.
As a matter of fact, I have a video that will take people through line by line filling that loan application out. And, so, I mean, I just walked through it. It's pretty rough because I'm like brand new to all this video stuff. So, but everybody seems to be a benefit to them. So, but yeah, so it's a very, it's a very interesting loan program that people can utilize. Now, and keep in mind, this is going to be anybody that has a small business. Okay. So these are people that cut hair. Anybody that files a Schedule C, okay? These are independent contractors, sole proprietors. These are, there's a lot of people that wouldn't necessarily think of themselves as qualifying for a business loan. You don't have to have employees. You don't have to have anything, a big business. So
and it includes nonprofits as well, correct?
And it includes nonprofits, correct. Now, the nonprofits, their loan is at 2.75. So, and nonprofits being like 501c3s. Unfortunately, in the guidelines, churches are explicitly written in as not available for this loan. And so, but, if you guys are attached to, have nonprofits that are actually, attached to your church that are actually 501c3s, then they're certainly able to take advantage of those funds. And so that's kind of the gist of that program. Now, let's talk about the PPP program. All right, when the CARES Act was signed, basically a little over a week ago, it was SBA's impression that they would have 14 days to figure out how to do all of this. Okay. And then they woke up Monday morning and Treasury had already issued some vague guidelines and an application, okay, and told everybody it was going to be great and every bank in the world was going to do it. You know, just fill this application out, take it to your bank, all right? And so, you know, obviously we got one of those applications pretty quick. And so our largest funder is SBA. So we contacted our folks at SBA and we said, hey, you know, here's the application, you know, what's going on. And we were quickly told that we were not allowed to send that application out and that it would have been nice had they been contacted. So then we find out that then on Friday, that was the time that Treasury said it was supposed to start. That then SBA changed the application completely, issued some additional guidelines, and then said that they will finalize some guidelines sometime in the future. We were hoping to see some of those this morning. We haven't gotten anything yet, so it's probably going to be later on in the week. So that loan is really not even completely done yet. It's not even completely crafted or done. So Treasury kind of jumped the ball, got everybody stirred up and excited, and that thing's really not even completed yet. Now, that doesn't mean people aren't taking the application. We know what the application looks like. We know what the rough guidelines of it are, and probably from a consumer standpoint, unless you have very specific things, like if you're self-employed with no employees, that's the only thing I don't think we quite understand maybe. But if you've got employees, it's a standard scenario. We have a pretty good understanding of what that program is going to be and work for you. But on the backside for the banks, they're not exactly sure how this is going to work and how they're going to make sure that they're going to be able to be, you know, get this loan actually, you know, bought or guaranteed, and then there's a lot of other questions. And so what I'm seeing in the marketplace, and I don't know what ExtraGo's position is, they'll tell you here in a little bit, but what I'm seeing in the marketplace is a lot of banks aren't doing it. I mean, I know a very large SBA only shop that issued out Friday late. They're like, hey, we were going to do this, but it's too vague right now. We're not even going to do this. And so there's going to be a lot of banks that aren't doing it currently. And the banks that are doing it seem to just be doing it for their existing customer base. And, you know, and then I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of them are just taking applications and waiting to see what happens on the other end of this. And so don't be surprised if a lot of banks come up with some sort of thing after this, if it goes one way. I really don't think this loan's actually ready yet, but that's just my personal opinion. I think a lot of folks are waiting for guidance, but you know, they listed, you know, somebody put out a deal that, you know, 18,000 loans were done, and you know, billions of dollars were issued already. I don't know if I buy that, but you know, if it was, those were, you know, some key customers with some large banks that were already queued up that were going to get those loans no matter what happened, or they had some sort of assurances that they were comfortable with. But the small local banks that I've been talking with aren't exactly comfortable to a large degree with doing it. But like I said, maybe there's been some direction over the weekend directly to the banks that I haven't gotten a hold of, and Tammy will be able to speak to that here in a little bit. But anyway, that's kind of the perspective on it. But the PPP is it's going to be an interesting program as I understand it. Obviously, you keep your employees working, and you bring them in, and as long as you continue that payroll and that number of heads from the time you launch that, get that loan, you have 8 weeks to maintain that payroll and that number of people, then the loan will be forgiven. The two loans are not mutually exclusive. I'm hearing that, but there's absolutely nothing in the guidelines that says that you can't use them. As a matter of fact, when you look at one of the examples in the PPP literature, it shows where an idle loan or the disaster loan is listed in the extension of it to be a previous one to be refinanced and completely forgiven in a PPP loan. However, that wouldn't be possible for anybody in Texas just because of the time frames. But anyway, of when our EIDL loans were even available. So anyway, maybe Tammy or somebody else has a little more information on what's get into the PPP, because it is a program that they will be actually implementing. So, but I'll take any questions that anybody has about any of the rest of this. But I will also suggest that for you guys as pastors, that one of the things that you could probably do is get this information out to your parishioners, particularly those that operate small businesses, the folks that cut hair, the folks that are handymen, the folks that have, a lot, that may not consider themselves, open to these sort of programs. Get this information out to them and encourage them to take advantage of it, because we really need to get this, get all of this money into our community as quickly as we can, because that's, just going to be so important when we get ready to come out of this, that we have enough funds available and in our community to just recirculate when we do open back up.
Thank you, Tim. And just to clarify before we go on to Tammy, you talked about two different kinds of loans, and the first one was a small business loan, and the second one was the PPP.
Well, the first one is called the EIDL loan, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. It's the SBA disaster loan, or EIDL loan.
And that's
EIDL.
IDOL?
EIDL. Economic
EIDL.
Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL loan. Yeah.
Thank you. And so the EIDL loan is only available to 501c3s as far as the nonprofit sector, but not to churches that are.
There's some other 501 like C6s and some other things, but not to churches. There are some other categories. But if anybody, and feel free to give me a call. We'd be happy to take a look and see. But certainly churches unfortunately aren't available.
Correct. But then the PPP loan does include churches and whatever that is.
That I'm not completely sure of. I have not seen where it specifically excludes them, but I've also not seen where it actually says that you can. That's one of those other fine guidance issues that I haven't gotten. That's one that could probably break either way. But although I think we're seeing more of an indication that the PPP may be available for churches.
Okay. Now the documents I have to share with you, the FAQs from the General Counsel of the Convention, the application that I have, again, you'd want to check the online version to make sure you get the recent one. All those have to do with the PPP. So let's go on to Tammy if we could. Tammy, you want to talk to us?
Okay, and Tim did a great job of kind of giving you the background of what all is going on. So our focus right now is going to be the PPP, and Tim accurately described what's at play here is the fact that they have appropriated this set amount of money, $359 billion, and said people can make application for it until June 30th or until the money runs out. So that is what has created this incredible fire drill where everyone at 8 o'clock on Friday morning wanted to be first in line in the whole United States of America to be in line for these funds, that we, as Tim accurately described, what we have right now is interim final guidance, and we got that late Thursday night, and then people wanted to start flooding us with applications on Friday. So we are still trying to figure out, we have people that worked all weekend long trying to formalize processes and procedures so that we can forward our clients a checklist that tells them what they need to provide in addition to the little 2-page application, which has been finalized and which people can go out online and at least fill that piece out. But the more important thing is we need to know what additional documentation and loan calculator tools we can provide so that people can accurately estimate what they can apply for, because it is not a simple formula. It is a complex formula. And we want to be able to provide the best information so that people can, in future, get this loan forgiven. If we do it wrong on the front end and then it's not forgiven, you've got a loan that has to be paid back in 2 years. And that is, you know, a significantly fast payback when we're in the kind of economic climate that we're in right now. So if people knew they were going to have to pay it back, they might be more inclined to apply for the EIDL that Tim described, because you can pay that back over 30 years. But everyone is focusing on the PPP because it is hopefully forgivable, but we have to do everything right, and we don't really have all of the data yet. So, you know, our hope is that the final guidance will come out shortly, but likely with the interim guidance, we are going to try and start going forward to be able to try and start submitting applications. I will tell you that our bank was not a prior SBA lender. We have gotten approval through the SBA to be able to do the loans, but it took us until Sunday to be able to access the site. So we couldn't, although they said we could do the loans, we couldn't get on the site. And then now we're trying to finalize what our processes and procedures are. But as Tim mentioned, we are only going to be doing this for our existing business clients. We are inundated as it is with just that population, and to try and give some level of service and accountability, we are having to limit ourselves to that. So if there's one thing I can say for the churches out there, you're going to want to approach your bank with this first. And if they are not going to be doing it, maybe they will have some possible referral sources for you for to other banks. But I think, as Tim described, most banks are trying to focus on their clients because we all have more than we can do right now. And it hasn't been finalized, and it's not an easy process right now while we're trying to figure it out. As he said, if we had been given a longer period of time, we could have had a more seamless rollout, but that hasn't happened. Now, I do think that President Trump came out this weekend and said that if these funds run out, we will appropriate more funds, because I imagine he's getting a lot of feedback from people saying these funds are going to run out quickly, and then we're still going to have a whole host of companies and businesses that would have been eligible that we're not going to have had the opportunity. So that's kind of my spiel at this moment.
And then can I add one thing too?
Certainly.
Just to add some clarification. So, because sometimes people don't understand, you know, why it's so difficult. And in fact, I didn't really until I was in on a conference call, because we were briefed right after the CARES Act was signed by a high-level Senate staffer who was a staffer for one of the senators that actually drafted that was on the committee that drafted the legislation that went in that part of the CARES Act. And so we were told, here's what we intended all to be, right? Okay, and they gave us all this stuff. So the thing it looked amazing. It looked great, all the stuff they were going to do. And I was so excited, and I thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful. And then as it rolled out last week, and we started seeing stuff, it was missing. It wasn't in there the way that they had intended it, right? And so then when we had a conference call, I wasn't the only one. Other people that were on there that had the ability to ask questions were asking, hey, that's not what they intended, because we had this conference call. And somebody said, well, you have to understand, those senators make that law, and that's what they intend when they make that law. But the problem is they send it over to us and tell us to implement that law. But they forget about all the other laws that they've passed. And we have to slide these within the structure of all the other laws they've passed. And so it doesn't always fit. Exactly, because everything has to, they may intend all these things to work that way, but when they have to fit it within the structure of everything else that's ever been passed or done, it ends up putting limitations and ends up putting, problems on it. And so that's why it takes time to implement these things, because they have to make sure, because nobody's going to, if this thing, something happens and they implement it just like that, and then it comes out, nobody's going to go and go, well, why did that Senate committee do it this way? No, they're going to look at somebody at SBA and go, well, you should have known about these laws, and why did you violate those laws when you implemented this thing, right? So, even though it is, it is taking quite a bit of time, or seems like it's quite a bit of time because it's so urgent right now. The fact that they're able to implement such complex litigation legislation in the midst of all of this is really, it's really kind of amazing. So, they're doing the best they can, I guess is what I'm saying.
Tim, let me add one more thing. My colleague just went on to the website sba.gov, and there is a frequently asked questions for faith-based organizations. And actually, I think they have made the EIDL program that Tim was talking about previously available to churches, it looks like. So you guys need to review, that would be a great link or a great form or for people to go out and look at, because they do have some FAQs specifically for faith-based organizations.
Wonderful.
Well,
thank you, Tammy.
Yeah. And then, and that's another thing that I do want to point out. All of this changes day by day, everything, because this is a different world. We had the whole process with the EIDL loan change, 3 times in a week. So, and here's the other thing. Lobby Congress, lobby senators, because, just because it's the way it is, you don't have to accept it. And, there's nobody not in the mood to give money away up there right now. So, just, get people together, and if you've got a big enough constituency, enough people holler, you can get things included and get things added. Kennedy Center got a bunch of money, right? So, hey.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And one of the main takeaways up to now I have is that churches can help by pushing this information out to their members, especially those who might be sole proprietors or small business owners, and that this could be very helpful to them, both of them perhaps.
Yep.
Let me skip over to Vernon if you have something to add to us this morning. Vernon?
Well, everything pretty well has been said. I think one thing to note is that any of the small churches who do not issue W-2s are probably going to be left out, because the starting point is, as far as I'm concerned, is your W-3, which is amalgamation of all of the W-2s. But I do have a calculator that I was sent that I can send to Tim. It is not specifically for churches, but it can be modified for that. I've already sent him the latest application that we have, and I would like to note that you would want to use the bank where you currently have accounts, probably, and that now I lost my train of thought on that.
Go to the bank you've already been doing business with.
Right, but that each bank is going to be a little bit different in what they require, because they've got their own internal procedures that they're using. So, and it is like everybody said, it changes from hour to hour, just about. But if anybody has any specific questions, I'm sure we will try to answer it.
All right. From our 3 special invited guests, are there any other things you want to add before we open it up for questions? All right. I'm seeing some questions in the comments about the ethics and, the Christian perspective of, church state, our view of that. And we can perhaps discuss that towards the end of this call if you like. But if you have a question for either Tim Holtkamp or Tammy Richards or Vernon King, this is your moment. Go ahead and speak up.
Hey, Tim.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
This is David Kozart for everybody. What we have made application, as I put in the chat, to try to keep our preschool staff employed because no school, no tuition, no payroll.
Sure.
But in filling out the application, our preschool is owned and operated by our church, and so therefore I have to give the entire payroll information. And for some of the others that may be thinking about it, everything that I have read has said that, in talking to somebody that was on that committee, kind of like you were talking to Tim, the intention was salary and not housing allowances. And I'm assuming that housing allowances for the military and others are different than ministerial housing allowances, because ours really is considered a part of compensation. But since it's on box 14 of the W-2, they were leaving it up to banks. Our bank said that they have been told not to look beyond box 5. Any thoughts on that for if churches are doing that? Because that will account for some of the formula.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be one of those things also that there's just not clear guidance on right now, right? And then so is workman's comp. Now, I can assure you that was not the intent when it rolled out, because I heard they wanted any and all items that were, related to payroll to be considered in it. However, when they're trying to figure out how to get these things done quickly, now the guidance that I've read, I mean, the only thing that's out there is a 31-page, the 31-page thing that came out from SBA. I'm going to have to see. I'd have to read it again specifically for you guys, but I can't say that was. I can't say that was specifically listed there. Certainly wasn't listed that way, right? So a lot of what you're getting, they're saying that's what they're told. Well, that's interpretation by somebody at the bank that's deciding that off of vague guidelines right now, right? Or maybe they called and talked to somebody, and then it's, some conversation that got there. So, I mean, but the problem is, you probably only have one bank to do it with, and that's what they're saying right now. So it might be that, just stay on top of that and argue that point with them. But if you want to, you can go to sba.gov and read that 31 pages and, and see, or ask them where it is or what have you. But I'd give them time to let the final guidelines come out, because these are interim guidelines, like you said. So once those final guidelines come out, it may be very clearly yes, or maybe very clearly no. And so, and then again, you just might not have it, that just might be, they're just not going to take a chance on that, because, it's them kind of risking, because the reality is there's no real recourse for them. They're not advertising the fact that, these things are not, nobody has to, these are non-recourse loans. You don't even, there's no, you don't put a personal guarantee on these things. So there's not like anything the bank can really do to you in Texas. So they're taking a tremendous amount of risk to even do these things, really, unless they know for sure and certain they got all their I's dotted and all their T's crossed, and SBA is going to take this thing off their hands. And they've all got some old guy in the back that remembers from back in the 80s when SBA, stuck them with a bunch of loans. I assure you.
David, did that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. In
I wish I
essence,
had better.
No, I think I've been following this since day one and reading the guidelines. And I was just tapping a note that part of that Thursday faith-based frequently asked questions was they are going to allow churches to claim religious exemption with regard to hiring on exclusivity, to where we would have a little protection. Otherwise, it could get real sticky real fast. So, but yeah, it's just all up in the air. I agree.
And then you have to convince your whoever it is. I mean, because chances are there's a committee at the bank that goes over this line by line. How are we going to handle this? And, they're probably going to err on the side of being a little more cautious, because let's face it, how many church clients do they have? And how valuable are you guys compared to other things, right?
Community Bank and Trust is basing it off of 2019 W3.
Yeah. So.
All right. Any other questions for Tammy or Vernon or Tim?
I've got one input.
Yes, sir.
Guidestone's website indicates that they think that the housing is included in compensation for what that means.
Okay. And if I understand the PPP right, they're currently calculating on it like 2.5 months of your current expenses as some part of that formula. Is that correct?
It's supposed to be 2.5 months of payroll, but payroll is supposed to include retirement benefits, sick, vacation, all of the aspects of payroll, which is why it's creating the question regarding housing, because in general, that wouldn't be. Then there's another component also that includes utilities, rent, all of those kinds of things, but only 25, it cannot be more than 25% of the loan made up of rent, utilities, and anything other than payroll. So it makes it a more complex formula to try and calculate.
Well, actually, my understanding is that is based upon you can use it for that, but you don't get to calculate it off of that for utility. You can use the loan for other things, but for the principal to be 100% forgiven, it cannot extend beyond that certain percentage you just mentioned.
Okay, yes, that is accurate. So you can use the expenses. I'll tell you too, if you get one of these loans, we are recommending that you open up a separate account for these loan proceeds, because in order to have the payback happen, you're going to have to be able to provide a lot of documentation as to exactly how those funds were used. So you're going to want to put the money into a separate account.
And the other caveat that everybody seems to be forgetting is the banks are going to make money off of this. We are going to pay interest. The principal may be forgiven if you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, but the SBA and the bank are going to make 50 to 100 basis points, 1%.
Right, and I think the interest is not forgiven. At least in the guidance we're seeing right now, it says the principal would be forgiven. It doesn't mention the interest, so I don't know if the interest will be or not. But 1% does not cover the cost of doing these loans. So yes, it's an interest rate of 1%, but that is not adequate.
But everybody needs to be aware of that it's not completely free.
Well, now I can tell you that was not the intent when it rolled out of that committee, and I would be surprised if the guidelines, when they're defined, don't make it completely free if you can hit the determined deal. I would be surprised. That's not to say that it won't happen, because the way that thing read, it did look like you're going to get maybe hit with that 1% for the period of time that you have it, which is going to be 8 weeks. if everything works right. So 1% APR over 8 weeks would be what you would be looking at as a cost as a user of the funds. And then there's a 5% 5 points or 5% that the banks would get. But I can assure you, every one of them, if it wasn't for worried about other banks doing this and taking their customers or dealing with customer service, every one of them would far better like to just pass on this whole nightmare and let somebody else deal with it. I assure you, even at 5%, I assure you.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Any other questions for Tim or Tammy or Vernon?
Yes. Hey, Tim, can I ask a question?
Sure, Joe.
So Vernon mentioned about the W-2s versus 1099s. So if the church gives 1099s, they will not be able to get this. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, but now here, let me tell you something. Whoever you issue a 1099 to is probably in better shape than getting your money. They need to then go ahead. They are open to potentially, once we get final guidelines, to get the PPP themselves, and they're open to the disaster loan that I described earlier, the EIDL loan. So, I mean, because they're they're a business too. So, like, I don't know if you got band members or who it is you're 1099, but whoever it is, they're a small business. See, those are the things you got to kind of shift your thinking, and the individuals need to shift their thinking instead of being, those very small businesses that think of themselves kind of as employees need to shift their thinking, because they're actually small businesses as far as this is concerned. And so there's a lot. And then I'm not up to date on all of the unemployment stuff, but I believe they're also, a lot of those guys are open for some unemployment benefits too, possibly. So, I mean, those guys may be in a whole lot better shape than if you could get this PPP and pay them.
Yeah,
they may do better not working for you.
I'm certain a whole lot of our church members across this county are individual business owners, and boy, they really need this information. So this will be very helpful to them to support their families and to keep going forward. Tim and Vernon and Tammy, if you're willing for other folks to reach out and ask you an email question after the call, would you mind dropping your email in the chat? Or if you can't do that, that's fine. We just want to.
I'll get it on here.
All right, just that way they can send you an email and follow up with any specific questions that they might have. For Tim, is there a place where we can see which banks in town are SBA banks?
Yeah, there are some links, but there's nothing that's working well right now. And even then, the most important thing is just to go to your individual bank that you bank with, because that's the only person that's going to stand a chance of doing it for you.
Okay.
And folks are getting set up left and right to try to adhere to them. And then the ones that are going to do it are doing that right now. But so, yeah. But yeah, SBA.gov. And then let me reiterate too. There's the only place to get true, definite information about any of this stuff is going to be SBA.gov. Anything else is going to be an interpreter. Well, two spots. SBA.gov is going to give you the actual guidelines and everything. Anything else is going to be an interpretation of that. Okay, because both of these loans come through there. Okay. Now, the other thing is your local bank on the PPP. Whatever your local bank tells you is going to be what it's going to be, because you're going to have a difficult time getting any other bank to do it for you. And so, even if it doesn't meet with the guidelines, even if it doesn't meet, that's what they're going to do. That's the way they're going to do it. And so, that's just going to be what you're going to have to deal with. And listen, there are going to be other people. They're going to get certain things included in theirs, and yours may not, or yours may, and theirs won't. And these things are going to be done different because each bank's going to have a different, slightly different. It's going to the 99% of it will be the same, but they're going to have slightly different tweaks just because of the way their legal departments or their committees look at it. And so I mean, come on, we just got to all take what we can get and do the best we can with it, and move forward. Don't look back. You know, just
All
like
right.
God told Lot, don't look back. You're going to turn to salt. Same situation here. Let's just keep looking forward and go take what we're getting and go on and don't you know, because that otherwise we're just not going to do well.